Hello and welcome back, everybody, to a new panel. This time, the topic is Homes in 2030, how will innovation and technology change the way we run our households? In this session, I want to explore how advancing technology will change the way we live in 10 years from now. What are the biggest trends of innovation in the Internet of Things, smart devices, and utility management? And how will data change the way we live and use our homes? These are a few of the questions we're going to explore together for speakers. Let me introduce you to them one by one. We'll have Jack Ray joining. Jack is the founder of Billing Better, an online platform that enables housemates to seamlessly set up all of their household's bills and split the total cost equally between them. So please welcome with me, Jack.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? Good to have you.
Very well.
Hi. We're also joining PJ Darling. PJ is the founder of Ittria, a pioneer of helping letting agents monetize their data and reduce costs through utilities, broadband, and insurance commissions, as well as free tenant referencing notifications. So please welcome PJ.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hi, nice to have you on board. Also joining us is Jamie Logue. Jamie is the head of product across Hive's smart monitoring products, encompassing full end-to-end customer experience from discovery through onboarding and in live support and maintenance. So please welcome Jamie. All right, and until Jamie joins, I'll also introduce Christoph. Christoph Luckl joining.
He's there.
Hi, Jamie, and hi, Christoph. And Christoph is the head of B2B at Nuki, a leading supplier of smart home solutions in Europe, which aims to make access solutions smarter and physical keys irrelevant with the Nuki smart locks. So hi, everyone, and welcome to this session.
Hello, everybody.
Thanks,
Hello.
Jack.
Good. So let's dive in. I'm curious to hear your different takes on what is the current landscape of smart homes. Christoph, Amy, all right, go ahead.
I think.
No, you started first. I saw Christoph pitching there, but you started first. So.
Straight in there. So for me, it's historically been around energy management, and I think I kind of refer back to the earlier talk that we had. And I think companies like Nest led the way a number of years ago, and it really became how do we take existing things and make them smart for almost an instant improvement in customer experience and ultimately the pounds in people's pockets. Nothing makes a smart home grow quicker than when it saves money and ultimately improves the customer experience.
Okay, Christoph, now it's your turn.
I mean, I'm with Nuki for 4.5 years, and my professional career since then is about making things smart and making houses smarter. And we do see, so we are a provider of smart door locks, and we have already partnered up with companies that provide cameras with property management systems, so software and hardware. In our world, the access and to secure the access is the main point right now, and this is the world we're living
in. Okay.
Yeah, I think I guess Jamie and Christoph, their companies focus very much on the B2C consumer experience, if I'm not mistaken. I think Jack and I would probably focus more on how the agent automates a lot of the management, specifically of tenanted properties. So what we're seeing is that in the old days, I mean, this goes back to things, when we used data transfer by fax, if you can believe it, and it's not that long ago. But nowadays, we're actually looking at building software platforms ourselves, Billing Better and other companies, to help agents to automate a lot of the back-end processes that they've been doing. And not only does that help the agents, but I think you're seeing a lot of new platforms entering the market, which are allowing the tenant to have a sort of singular view of the property, whether that be looking at their leases or looking at their consumption data through products like Hive, or being able to access the property like Christoph's company. But it also allows them to have one central repository for all the information about their property. And I think that's kind of the interesting thing that's developing over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I suppose to add to that from a tenant's perspective, smart meters, I suppose, are the ones in the UK that we're very familiar with the TV adverts and everyone kind of wanting to have one. And I think from a tenant's perspective, that is, that can be super important for them in terms of really like knowing how much energy they're using, rather than having to worry about, am I using the right amount? Do I know where my meter readings are? And then potentially getting a big bill in the post down the line. So I think from a tenant experience perspective, the kind of smart meter element is super important to allowing people to have peace of mind over how much they're paying for their household bills. And I suppose that's the kind of the angle that we at Building Better bring.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So before we move on to questions that we have prepared, a kind reminder to the audience: you can ask questions and upvote questions that have been asked by other audience members if you go to the Slido tab in your chat and just type in your questions, upvote them. Good. So let's dive in a bit deeper. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how can easier access to data improve the utility management experience? And are smart meters helpful in this, or can they lead to barriers to entry to data access?
Yeah, I mean, if I jump in there, so I mean, definitely in terms of smart meters helping letting agents with particularly void periods, to ensure that void period bill they get is accurate, and they're not spending time on the phone dealing with a minimal bill for a few pounds when it's wrong. So 100%, smart meters can help in that regard. And ultimately from knowing suppliers as well, from a letting agent's perspective, if we're able to utilize the data that's available to show agents who specific energy suppliers are for a property, that will also help them. So I think there's a lot that can be done to help agents in this regard.
Yeah, I
think it's a really interesting time at the moment.
Oh, sorry, Jimmy, go ahead.
I was going to say, the challenge at the moment is data is so available. There's so much of it, and there's such a huge quantity. I think data isn't necessarily the challenge. It's what does the data mean, and what do I need to do with it? So I think we kind of, and I think, Peter, you talked about a minute ago, you've got this mix between that consumer side and that kind of slightly more B2B element of it. And I think, ultimately, the data exists, whether that's smart meter data, smart water meter data, which is starting to ramp up again. Consumer data, presence data in homes. Smart speakers can tell you whether people are at home now. It is there. It exists. I think for me, it's really about taking the data and putting it into something that is simple, easy for the customer to get hold of, and it tells me what to do. What do I do with it? I'm going to present you some information. I'm going to tell you what it means, and I'm going to give you guidance as what to do next. Whether that's, as Jack says, a void property. Actually, I want the data that tells me what's happened. I want to be able to confirm that it's correct. I want to be able to pay the bill. I want to be able to know that it's right. So it starts with the data, but you very quickly enter in, okay, then what, and how do I interact with that, and what do I do with it?
But do you not find the utility data actually hasn't sort of kept up with other applications? Because with the issue that we've always had when it comes to voids, and I'm sure, Jack, you've got the same problem, is that industry data is managed by Ofgem and the companies that they employ to manage the data for both gas and the electricity networks. And the issue is trying to get access to that data, and so they haven't been able to present it in any kind of format that allows us to dive into it and to present it in a meaningful way to consumers, whether they be homeowners or tenants. And so I think that's been one of the challenges. I know they're working on it, but it's been a bit slow.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's the problem, isn't it? We want access to it to do the right thing, but it's difficult to actually get that access. So yeah, I agree.
There's always an opportunity to pitch a new product when we have these things, right? And it's something that we've been working on at Hive. There's ultimately a heating service that says this is your smart meter data. This is, I'm going to put a budget in. I want to spend £50 on my energy this month, and it will track against your smart meter and say you're on track, you're about to go over, watch out, turn the heating off or do something different. I think the other challenge you've got here is who owns that data and who has the rights to ultimately view it and use. GDPR is a fantastic thing, but in many cases, that data exists, but am I allowed to share that with you? Do you have a right? Has the tenant who lived there at that time, do they own that data? Have they said, I no longer own it, now it's back to the landlord? And when the landlord goes, does it go back into another tenant? So it's often the process and who has the right to access that data at any given point in time.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, because the challenge actually is.
PJ, sorry to interrupt you. I'm just curious if Christoph has an opinion on this too.
I have a very particular example of using data and not using data. So for us, it's very important to also secure data usage. So you can, for example, use our product without even sign in. So you can totally anonymous use Nuki. But if you, for example, use the smart log for, let's say, Airbnb usage or something like that, it can give you peace of mind. If you know your guest has arrived and you get this data out of the product, and the product or whatever product behind tells you that the guest arrived. Yeah. So I would say in some topics it would be very useful to gain data. While I also think there will be a natural stop line where people say until here, and the rest should not be tracked in any cloud. Or even worse.
Okay. Sorry, PJ, for interrupting. And I want to be mindful of time because we have a few more questions. So please finish what you want to say before.
No, I think it actually, Christoph sort of touched on it, which is the challenge with the tenant market in particular is you've got a lot of turnover. So it's the timing of making that data available. So it's Jamie's right in the sense that, okay, who has control over the data and who can authorize the access to that data? But then you overlay that with the challenge of how do you establish who actually is in the property at a particular period of time, and therefore whose data can you actually use? And that's been the challenge with the tenancy market, because it's reasonably fluid in the sense that the average tenancy I think is about 30 months in the UK, whereas the average homeowner is there for about 7 years. So you've got a lot of changeover, and so it's how do you manage that authorization of the data to coincide with when there's a change in tenancy. It's less of an issue, I think. I mean, Jamie, you probably know better, but it's less of an issue with the homeowner market.
So before we dive in further into the data question, I'm sure we could talk about this for a long time, but we just have limited time. Let's move on to questions if you're all fine with that. And a quick reminder to the audience, you can submit questions in Slido and upvote submitted questions if you're curious to ask either the whole panel or specific members a specific question. So my next question for you, can smart homes make life easier for letting agents and property managers, of which many are probably watching this right now?
I think undoubtedly, yeah. And we've obviously, we've just touched on that now in terms of, the data around energy and suppliers and void periods. And I think that's some of the kind of key pain points that the letting agent world is very aware of. So I think if there's a way in which, as Jamie's saying, if we can kind of harness that data and present it to the right people at the right point, there's an opportunity, I think, to create a product that helps letting agents to become much more efficient. And yeah, I think as PJ is referring to, it's just about, from our perspective, bringing that solution to light is getting hold of the information that we need to be able to execute those time-saving skills for the letting agent. But the short answer is yes.
I think one of the things that I found really interesting as well is actually, what areas can we help with? I'll park the challenge of data and kind of managing who owns these things for the moment. But you've got diagnostics tools these days. How well is a boiler running? Because ultimately, in a rented property, these are some of those things that can come with a large bill for landlords and ultimately kind of the agents who manage those things. And how do you ensure that you're dealing with things at the right time to keep your tenants happy, make sure that they're paying rent on time and they're there and they're happy and running a profitable business? And how do you make sure that you can address the challenges and the problems as quickly, as efficiently, and ultimately as possible? Some other great examples now is mold detection sensors. With a couple of really basic sensors in a home, it can monitor for mold, and you would get really early warning if there is a potential problem in your home or your own property. I can go in and I can deal with it quickly, effectively, and in some cases, identify the problem, have a solution, and book an engineer or a tradesperson to come over and fix it, and almost avoid some of those big expensive bills, which are of course a huge risk.
Okay, Christoph, I'm sure you have an opinion on this topic.
Yeah, so of course it makes the life easier, because I think that's the purpose of smart home. Yeah, for private persons as well as for landlords. Just imagine what you can do now over air, what you can do remotely, while in the past you had to go there physically every time to do something or to change something within an apartment or something like that. So I think if smart home would not make our lives easier, it would have no purpose at all. So of course, this is not only for private persons, but especially for lotlands.
Okay, and if no one said anything more, then I'll go to the next question then, which is, with 5G enabling IoT innovation, what will be the biggest trends in new smart devices in the next 10 years? And I'm very curious to hear what you think.
Well, I guess
repeat the question. So with 5G enabling, I'm happy to repeat the question. I think Jack,
no, all good. No,
I thought you. No, good. Please go ahead.
So, I mean, again, I'll take it from the Times perspective, because that's kind of what we deal with. But 5G, it holds out the promise of not having to worry about getting a landline broadband connection, and that's a challenge for tenants. It's they want to have it live. Everybody wants to have it live when they arrive, because you don't want to be without broadband for even a day, or frankly for an hour. I mean, if you talk to my kids, if it's 30 seconds, I'm in trouble, right? So the idea is to be able to have that with you, and 5G holds the promise of having basically portable Wi-Fi, portable broadband. So you can go from any property to any property. But there have been challenges in the past, whether it be 4G and I'm not sure about 5G, to be honest, because maybe you guys know the technical side of it. But a lot of properties, basement properties, old properties, they have challenges getting access to it. So whether it be simple access to 5G for broadband, or to enable services like Hive or Christoph's product, I'm not sure how you manage those. I mean, maybe Jamie and Christoph, you have a view on that.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges to any smart home at the moment is the method of connectivity. So you've got many companies that go Wi-Fi, you've got Z-Wave, Zigbee, and obviously kind of the newer methods such as Thread, which is being developed at the moment. And I think 5G is going to be a massive change. And ultimately, it's a question of bandwidth. Many of the sensors and the devices that are out in the market now are such tiny, small amounts of data that realistically I could share it over a 10-year-old cellular connection. It doesn't need to be quite that level. So actually, I think it's going to start to enable things that aren't currently possible. Things like cameras and historically, and I come back to your point, PJ, it's primarily about connectivity. It's that I can get into the home straight away. I don't have to worry about getting extra devices into the house. I don't have to worry about getting a broadband set up. It's almost my 5G connection will follow me wherever I go.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be a massive game changer. I think what's going to be interesting is, what are the things that we don't know yet? There is a whole raft of bandwidth coming that isn't currently available. And it's just going to enable a lot more data. Again, coming back to the earlier question, it's going to enable a vast amount more data. So the key challenge with it is not just setting up 5G, it's how do we manage the bandwidth and the quantity of information that's going to come from it. I think it will also enable a huge amount more of things like security. It's a much more secure network. I think like I said, it enables camera and live feeds. I think it will shift to TVs, where ultimately you streaming these Netflix, Amazon services, etc., straight without the need for Wi-Fi, and TVs will start to be connected direct to 5G.
I think from my perspective, our perspective at Bill and Better, last year we trialed providing routers that could take a SIM card to letting agents, so that the letting agent could pass the router onto a tenant as they're moving into a new home. And I think that is probably, you know, from a Wi-Fi perspective, the best customer experience, where a tenant can have this router that they can take into their home as they pick up the keys, plug it in, and they're online straight away. Some of the problems that we had with that with 4G is that, you know, it's not quite fast enough, and there are issues with that. However, with the emergence of 5G, and as Jamie's saying, it comes down to, you know, how fast and how reliable can that be. If we can get to the sort of similar speeds of, say, 100 megabytes per second of broadband speed, which is similar to kind of a standard Virgin Media broadband package, then I think that, you know, that could be a real possibility to have this kind of plug and play solution. And I think from a kind of tenant experience, which you know, which the letting agents will be thinking about, you know, how great would it be if you could just sort of give them the keys, give them the router, they move in and they're off. So yeah, there's that is a possibility. It's a real possibility. And I suppose the only thing that is a barrier to that right now is the availability of 5G and the cost of the data on the 5G, because you know, if you're paying for unlimited data on 5G, that most likely now is going to be double the cost of, say, a Virgin Media broadband package. So we almost have to kind of wait for it to be widely available and for the cost of the data to come down to slightly to kind of make that worthwhile. However, there will be this sweet spot relatively soon where, you know, it's available, it's cheaper, and people are willing to pay a little bit more maybe for that level of service.
Okay. Christoph, any words from your side about the new smart devices you see coming in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think it will not be, the game changer may not be 5G, but I think narrowband IoT. Yeah, because if the products go directly in the internet without needing a bridge, because now we are full of bridges in most homes, because every smart device needs its own bridge to get connected. I think this will be the next huge step on evaluation, but this will of course take us a few years from now. But I think regarding the smart home products, the narrowband IoT will be the next huge thing in the development.
Okay. So unless anyone you want said something, I would move to questions that we have in Slido. And there's an interesting one, which is what's necessary to have an open utility standard similar to open banking that connects any household with utility companies via API?
Yes, if I just start with this, I'm sure PJ, you know, you'll be able to jump in on this one as well. I think, you know, we've done a lot of work on this recently to understand, you know, how can we get access to the data? And one of the problems with utilities and with energy suppliers is that, you know, if you live in a flat, for example, you might not match the flat number to the correct address on the national database. So that's tricky, because although, you know, you feel like you've got the data, it might not then match to where the data.
It's the wrong person's data.
Yeah. So there are some innovations that are out there that we're looking at that ultimately enable us to get access to what's called the MPAN and the MPRN for each property. Once you've got the MPAN and the MPRN, you can then match that to the National Energy Database to find the supplier. So the challenge really is getting access to the MPAN and MPRN, and then being able to access the National Energy Databases for gas and electricity to match that to find who the supplier is. And once you can do that, there's lots of nice innovations that can happen. You can show a letting agent or a tenant who their suppliers are. You can contact those suppliers for meter readings and voids. So to answer the question, I think it's close, but it's not quite there. And it's going to, I think, as PJ referred to, it's going to require a bit more work from the guys who are controlling that data.
It's Exoserve and ECOS. So basically mandated by Ofgem to sort of to say, listen, guys, you've got to make this an open standard. And so I know there's work underway, but it takes a little bit longer. I mean, it's a big ship to turn, Ofgem and particularly ECOS and Exoserve, and that there's a reason for that, which is the data is actually, you know, pretty important to a whole bunch of different parties to the utility market. So my understanding is that they're working on it. Timing wise, I suppose kind of like smart meters, it may not happen exactly when they expect it to do. So I'm not holding my breath. I think it's a couple of years probably before we start seeing that. But there's a lot of parties that are waiting for it. And as you say, Jack, there's a huge amount of opportunities there in terms of making life easier for agents, tenants, and for that matter, homeowners.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely.
I think, as you said, it's regulatory. These things need to be driven from almost the top at a government level, right? It needs to be promoted. It needs to be built into all of the legislation, and these regulatory bodies need to make it clear what the requirements are, and in some cases go a little bit further, run those proof of concepts. Get out there, show that it's possible, and then that will ultimately lead to scale.
Yeah.
Which very nicely, by the way, answers another question that was asked in Slido, which is, does government need to regulate or deregulate smart home IoT data?
I could probably take a quick question, quick answer on that one is they are. These standards are coming into practice now. I think particularly to drive security. Ultimately, you don't want to restrict the innovation of a number of companies, whether it's kind of a more recognized smart home provider or a new startup trying to do something a bit differently. I think the challenge we've got is, and I can talk on behalf of Hive, you build a product and you build the customer experience, and you can get these third parties come in and sell on, selling platforms that, I'm sure we all use frequently, but they're not secure. Now that's often reflected in the price you pay for products. For me, the regulatory requirements coming in are making sure that customers understand what they're buying, the lifetime that these products will last for, as well as making sure that we meet all of the right security requirements to protect customers in their homes, whether it's smart lighting, smart cameras, smart thermostats. And the challenge is also, how long do you expect something to last for? Before I had Hive installed in my house, it'd go 20 years without touching a thermostat. Am I as a customer expecting that thermostat that I bought to last for 20 odd years? Christoph, I install a smart lock. I haven't changed my locks in a decade. Now all of a sudden with a smart lock, is that something I'm expecting to last me 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? And I think you need to be really clear with the customer up front how long something's going to be supported for. And I think that's what, that's the regulations that they're starting to come through now. Things like Secure by Design are really leading the way. And ultimately, it's on the retailers to drive that. They need to say, I will only sell products that align to this standard. That's where the customer protection will come in.
Okay. So unless anyone wants to dive deep on the government question, there is a question on the opposite end of the spectrum of questions possible, which is, what are your views on using a smart home to gamify the operation of a tenancy to give value back to the residents while improving efficiency? Christoph.
Very interesting approach. So we can see that gamification helps very, very often to bring people into something they did not know that they will need it. So I think that could be a very smart approach to make residents more efficient. I didn't see it yet, to be honest, or it didn't come away my way until now. But I think it would be a very smart approach, to be fully honest.
I understand the question.
So, I guess the question is, in a way, like, is there any way to incentivize the tenant through gamification through smart homes
I see.
more efficient in what they're using, may it be electricity or water or something else?
At least the answer is inevitably yes. I think it's how you define gamification, what that means to the person interacting with it. Is it 1,000 coins or what is it that I'm actually offering you back? I think it's particularly interesting where you believe that there is ultimately a cost saving or a benefit that you as a landlord.
I think, Jamie, sorry to interrupt you. The question is it possible to do that while improving efficiency. I think like this is from a landlord's perspective, in the sense of, can I give back some of the value to the tenant and still retain some of the efficiencies saved or gained?
I think it depends on the hardware, and it depends if they're a multi-use purpose. So I come back to earlier example where I talked about, mold detection capability. Well, within that same device, there is a whole variety of other functionality. How do I take that one piece of hardware that provides a benefit to a tenant and a landlord at the same time? And I think that's what's going to enable you to start to put it into your customers' homes.
Okay. And I'd like to take this on to a more general question that might be very interesting for an audience to hear, which is, can making a home smart have a positive impact on rent yield?
Well, I suppose if you can show that the property is more efficient, then that will naturally be more attractive. But I think the nature of the current rental market in the UK is, please just give me the place. I don't care almost how much it costs, because the demand is outstripping supply. So the incremental benefits of having a more efficient home are I would say hugely secondary to being able to actually just get the place in the first instance. I don't know what you guys think.
I think it's an interesting. I actually kind of look at it with a slightly different angle. Like, how do I reduce my costs? How do I use smart home energy to reduce my risk and ultimately the costs of maintaining the home? I think, like you said, Peter, it's hard. People you just give me the house. Oh, but it's got this smart lighting system. Whatever, just give me the keys, please.
Exactly.
And I don't think we're there yet, where the customers are really pushing for it as a requirement. But I think we can kind of, impact the bottom line, as it were, through cost saving rather than necessarily driving additional revenues at the top.
Yeah, I mean, I would have thought. I mean, this is a purely personal perspective, but I actually quite like the idea of pay-as-you-go tariffs when it comes to having smart meters in place, because one, from a tenant's perspective, that you're from day one, you're only paying for what you're using. You don't have this issue of estimated bills, which of course is the blight of the marketplace and Jack and I's life. So you want to be in a position where, I mean, pay-as-you-go has been a pretty popular product for mobile phones. I think the same thing. Once you can get over the stigma of what was previously prepay meters, which were installed because you hadn't paid your bill and you have to use a card to go to the shop and top it up. If you can get over that, and there's a communication challenge with that, which will take time. If you can get over that and you get customers starting to use pay-as-you-go, then I think there's a huge opportunity there.
Okay. So I'm very mindful about our time. We have 2 minutes left before we come to the end. And I would like to take one question, and I would like to get a short answer from each of you about the best idea that you can come up with. And it's an interesting question, which might resonate with many of our audience. What should be the first practical smart home investments for landlords to embark on upgrading their properties into smart properties starting from tomorrow? And I maybe add to that question, you cannot name your own product.
I was going to say, Christoph, I wonder what you're going to say.
I'm not
Who is saying smart locks from me? So no.
Smart locks. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm solution agnostic, so I'll kick off. I mean, I do think smart meters, despite the problems that have happened in terms of the rollout, the timing, the cost. I mean, we're into the tens of billions now. I think we're probably already about 3 years late, and we've got another couple of years. The hassles involved in terms of agents getting smart meters installed. That all aside, I think there's opportunities, combining with Hive and other companies like that, where you can manage that visual interface with the meter. I think that's a real opportunity in terms of cost savings for tenants.
Sorry to cut you off. We're short on time, and I would like to get an answer from Jack as well.
Yeah, I'm going to sort of jump in with Jamie's product because ultimately, if you're a landlord who's for example renting your property to students or with the bills included, and if you have a smart thermostat in there where you're able to track usage that could, really help you as a landlord from having, amongst many other things, I'm sure, but from a kind of student bills included perspective, which we look at quite a lot, that will really kind of enable the landlord to have eyes on what the usage looks like and have and be able to kind of see that. So
thank you
from my angle. Yeah,
thank you. Jamie?
It's difficult not to pick one of my own because we've got many fingers and many pies. I think to me, to focus on the green agenda that we've got at the moment, we all need to.
You're short on time. You can only pick one.
I'd say things like heat pumps, actually taking energy consumption slightly to that next level.
Great call.
Okay, great. Christoph?
I'll make it short. From the point of the landlord, I would also go with the smart meters. Easy as that.
Okay, great. We are now unfortunately out of time, but I want to thank you all, Jack, PJ, Christoph, and Jamie, for a great conversation. And I want to wish you a fantastic afternoon forward. Thank you very much for participating. And for the audience, our session next coming up in 5 minutes will be a panel on the future of the housing market. Will we all be renting from professional landlords? That's the question we're going to answer next, and wish you a nice break. See you soon. Goodbye. Thank you very much for joining all.
Thanks,
Bye.
Ken.